Hi Not Board Gamers and welcome back to Not Board Gaming. I'm your host, I'm Mark. Now today's video is going to be my top 10 video of solo games released in 2021. It's now the 3rd of January 2022, so a little bit late with this list, but I was on vacation over the Christmas period. So I thought what I'd do is, in previous years, I've kind of done a top 10 solo games I played list at the end of the year. But in a couple of months' time, I actually want to release my definitive solo list. So I thought what I'd do is have a look at the top 10 solo games that were released in 2021 or delivered to backers in 2021. I'm also going to just list some kind of honourable mentions as well, games which didn't make the list and reasons why they haven't made the list, and also some of my disappointments for 2021 as well. So settle in, sit down, grab a coffee, grab a mince pie if you've got any left, or grab a biscuit and watch my top 10 solo games of 2021. So, just before we start the top 10 list, I thought I'd do some honourable mentions of games which haven't made the top 10, and there are a number of reasons. Some of them is that they got delivered to me just at the back end of 2021 and I haven't had a chance to actually play them as of yet. So while technically 2021 releases, I'm only getting to grips with some of them, like what you see in front of you, which is Uprising, Curse of the Last Emperor. So let me just pull up the box for this. So this is by Nemesis Games, Uprising, Curse of the Last Emperor. It's a fully co-op 4X game for 1 to 4 players. As a solo player, you can play 2 factions. I played this on TTS with Cornelius, one of the designers, at the beginning of December. They kindly sent me over a review copy, and I've got to tell you, I am 3 games deep into this, and I absolutely love it. I will have a review for this coming out probably by the end of January, but it's a 4X game with acrylic standees rather than miniatures. It's got a lovely flow to it. You can play as many chapters as you want and make the game as long or as short as you want. And the only reason it's not going into my top 10 list is because I didn't start playing this until yesterday, which was the 2nd of January. But look out for the review. I've got a feeling that in the next year this will feature in a lot of people's other top 10 lists as well. Another game for me which hasn't quite made the top 10 is a bit of a darling for a lot of people, and that is Obsession. I got Obsession literally just before I went on holiday on the 20th of December, and I managed to play it 3 times solo and once with my wife, and I like it. It's a beautiful, nice game, kind of mid-weight Euro, relatively straightforward to learn, but lots of decision space. It's not quite the lightning in a bottle for me that it is for other players, and I don't think it's right for me to include it on the list at this stage, because I don't think 3 solo plays is enough for me to include Obsession. I know also it's an older game as well. The Ghost Betwixt by the wonderful Dustin Freund. It's a fantastic 90s style RPG where you are going in search of your kind of lost brother in this haunted house but dangerous house. Just the amount of depth in the game belies the look of it, which just looks like slightly cartoony. But imagine Scooby-Doo for grown-ups. It's that kind of thing. You're battling monsters, you're upgrading your characters. There's a lot there. I previewed the game, I think back in May, June time, which was great, just before the full production run was done for backers. And it arrived, again, beginning of December. It's still in shrink at the moment because I need to devote some time into the Ghost Betwixt. But again, I've got a feeling that that will feature in a lot of people's lists next year as people have had time to play it. So that's the Ghost Betwixt by Dustin Freund. As well as Uprising, Curse of the Last Emperor, which obviously arrived just now as well, kind of into the new year. I also got as my my last Kickstarter delivery of 2021, because it came on New Year's Eve and I didn't get to play it until the 2nd of January. So I've got a feeling this will be really high in my list because it's Nemesis Lockdown. Now, if you watch my channel at all, if you watch my previous top 10 solo games that I love, Nemesis ranks as my 3rd favourite solo game of all time. it was with a sense of trepidation that I got locked down to the table. You know, I'd interviewed Adam Kupinski, we spoke a number of times, he knows how much I love Nemesis, so I backed lockdown. It arrived on New Year's Eve, put it on the table, set it all up, read through the rules. If you know Nemesis, you know 75% of this game, and it's not a letdown in any way. If anything, mechanically, it's superior to Nemesis. I've only played 1.5 games so far, and man, is it tension-filled. Man, are there so many other things, so many new things to do. But the new mechanisms, just enough to make it fresh yet familiar. However, 1.5 plays in, obviously that's folded into January. A lot of backers haven't received that. I've just got a feeling that will be really high on next year's list for me. So that's kind of my honourable mentions there for games that almost made the top 10, which didn't make the top 10. Now, there's just one more game. And I went from putting this game as my number 1 game of 2021, my number 1 solo game in 2021, to a game which hasn't made the list in 2021. And it hasn't made the list, but it is still possibly my favourite solo game of 2021. The reason it hasn't made the list is I don't own a copy of this game. I played it once, the physical version once at GridCon with other people, then I played about half a dozen times, maybe a little bit more, solo on Tabletop Simulator. I have it on pre-order, but I don't have the actual game, so it's with a kind of a real dichotomy for me that I decided that Ark Nova, had I got the physical copy, I could put that on my list, but I haven't got it. So if I haven't got the physical copy, I really can't put it on my list of top games of top solo games of 2021. I love Ark Nova. It's just this tableau building, engine builder, zoo type game. I know it's really high in demand at the moment and really low in stock everywhere. I've had my ordering with Wayland Games for, I don't know, about 8 weeks now. Should have been dispatched by the end of the year, hasn't been dispatched as of yet. And with that, Ark Nova, which if I had the physical copy would go into my list as probably the number 1 game of this year, hasn't quite made the list. So we'll see where Ark Nova comes next year. So that's all of the honourable mentions, plus Ark Nova, which went from being number 1 to not being in the list at all. So without much further ado, let's get into my top 10, and starting at number 10. So at number 10 is Batman, the Animated Series Adventures. This arrived kind of back end of November, beginning of December. I played it quite a few times now. It's a huge, sprawling adventure game with loads of expansions and scenarios that you can play from IDW Games. The last board game that IDW will be producing. They've closed down their board game division. It should have been delivered about a year ago. And I think I drunkenly backed Batman, the Animated Series Adventures when the Kickstarter started, and then almost forgot about it. And then last year I was like, oh yeah, maybe it should be delivered. I was going through my list of Kickstarters, and then it got delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed and yada, yada, yada. Therefore, I wasn't expecting much when it arrived. Well, this huge behemoth of material arrived and boxes arrived. Great artwork, great looking minis on there, really nice gameplay, dice-based gameplay but fully mitigable, and you can play it as a solo player or with four characters. I've only played it with 4 characters so far. I haven't tried the true solo, and I think it's fantastic. It's not going to be for everybody. The rules are a little bit kind of finicky in places, but the amount of content that I got with this game is just huge. I could literally play this game every day for the year and possibly not go through all the content. There is so much content there, and I think it really does evoke this sense of Batman that you want from it, the kind of fighting crime, fighting the bad guys, mitigating everything around you, but it is heavily dice dependent. I am hoping to do a review for that probably sometime in February once I've played the game enough. So that is at number 10, Batman, the Animated Series Adventures. So, now at number 9. So at number 9 is a game from Awakened Realms, and this is where Awakened Realms for me really shine. You see, games like A Tainted Grail and Etherfields, the big sprawling sandboxy type games, I think Awakened Realms on those tend to lose focus a little bit, and they become flabby and bloated, and the more they put in, the less enjoyable they become. But however, when they do their self-contained games like Nemesis, like this War of Mine, like Nemesis Lockdown, which obviously only will probably be on my list next year, that's where I think Awaken Realms absolutely shine, where they do these almost self-contained games where you're actually playing a game to a conclusion rather than just playing a session and then it continue and ad infinitum and sometimes ad nauseum. And this game, again, I backed it. I wasn't too sure about the solo on this, and it came through, and there's effectively two ways you can play it. You can play it solo, or you can play it co-op, two-handed, and of course you can play it multiplayer as well. But I played it both solo and co-op two-handed, and I think it's a great game. And this game is The Great Wall by Awaken Realms. Again, another game I backed, and I think I did this at the time. I was backing a lot of Kickstarters, and it was the Awaken Realms name against it, and I thought, yeah, this is the kind of game I think I want. Then I more or less forgot about it, and it came through, and boy, was I so glad I did back it. It looks fantastic on the table. It has a great presence. The rulebook, it's Awaken Realms, unfortunately, is slightly ambiguous in places. However, once you get the core mechanics of the game down, it plays really nice, and it's this kind of worker placement where you are defending or you're trying to build up the wall to defend against the incoming hordes as they try and take over your or invade your territory. I think it's wonderful. It's a fantastic, fantastic game. Again, I've had it and I've played it quite a few times. I will be doing a review on this at some point when I clear my review backlog. But yeah, Great Wall by Awaken Realms, I think once you get past that rulebook, is a fantastic experience. Okay, that was number 9. Now, we're going to move to number 8. And at number 8 is a game which I picked up at Essen. And yeah, I picked up a few games at Essen, and I knew very little about this. And then it was one of the kind of high point games for a lot of people at Essen. A lot of people wanted this game. It became very much in demand. I queued for about 30 minutes to get one of the last copies of it. Not Ark Nova, unfortunately. No, this is Golem, which is a pure point salad of a game where you are trying to kind of maximize your points by creating these kind of clay golems, if you like, and you're working against other people or the AI in this instance. And it's got this marble mechanism where you put marbles into this kind of temple, and they come out, and the different coloured marbles do different things. I think it's a great game. It's a point salad game. There is, the theme is really light on this, and it doesn't matter because the mechanisms all fit together to make a really, really, really nice experience. I was genuinely surprised by how much I enjoyed Golem when I got it. I first played it two-handed just to get to grips with it. I played it solo, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 times since then, and I've had a great time every time I'm playing it. There are difficulty modifiers in the solo as well. The solo rules, again, they're slightly ambiguous, so you just have to kind of work your way through them, but they start to make sense. I know I reached out to David Digby, who helped them with the solo rulebook a couple of times just to clarify some things, but I really enjoy Golem. Now, I think it's going to get delivered to FLGSs, and you'll be able to pick it up sometime in the next month or so. I've had it since October, and I think it's fantastic. So do keep an eye out on Golem. If your worker placement, point salad-y type games with a thin theme, but lots of decision space appeal to you, then go and check out Golem. It's my big surprise I got from Essen. Now we're on to number 7. And at number 7 is a game which, before it came out, courted controversy. Why? Because it had a huge price tag. Why? Because it wasn't truly the 3rd edition of a game. It's almost like the game 2.5. And I was so ambivalent about this game until I previewed it. Asmodee invited myself and some others to preview it at the UK Games Expo, UKGE. And we did the first scenario, and after that first scenario, I went off and I ordered a copy. And this is Descent: Legends of the Dark. I think Descent is just a great solo game. Yes, it's big and expensive. That will always be a barrier for a lot of people. Yes, it's app-driven. That will always be a barrier for a lot of people. But if you can afford the game and you like the idea of a dungeon crawler and you like and you don't mind app integration, then you're going to have a great time with Descent. The story is potentially full of some of the kind of standard dungeon crawler tropes, but once you start laying out the scenery, and as you play through the scenarios, the scenery builds up and builds up and builds up, and the map becomes more and more. It becomes a really good and involving and engrossing experience. Now, it's a little bit linear. There are some side quests that you can do. I think there are only 16 quests in the game, and they will all funnel you towards an inevitable conclusion. But with it being app-based, of course, the possibility for sequels or expansions, should I say, is rife on this, and I think they've already announced the next batch of content for it as well. I have a great time with it. It's not for everybody. The cost is a barrier. The app integration is a barrier. The fact it takes up a lot of table real estate is also a barrier. But I am enjoying my time with Descent. I am taking my time with Descent. So it gets to the table once every 3 or 4 weeks, and I have a couple of sessions on it. Then I put it away, play other games. I'm enjoying it, and I'm savouring my time with Descent. So that's app number 7. That's Descent. Legends of the Dark for me. I think it's just absolutely fantastic. Now we move on to number 6. And at number 6 is a game, and I think it was my first Kickstarter delivery of 2021. And I backed it because of the name of the pedigree of the designer of the game, and his ability to constantly create solo modes, or great solo modes, should I say, and the fact it looked different. It's a market manipulation game. It's about aliens coming down and taking artifacts from Earth and selling them putting them in their own museums and selling them, etc., to themselves. And it's got quite a unique theme, and market manipulation with a solo theme is kind of different. And of course, this game is Excavation Earth from Mighty Boards. I think it's fantastic. I think it doesn't get enough love. I know they did the Kickstarter for the expansion a little bit earlier this year, which I previewed, and I know that gained a lot of traction. But as a solo player, if you're looking for something slightly different in your solo kind of worker placement mechanisms, and you're looking for something that's got market manipulation, some really good colours on the board, and some really bright stuff. The rules, a little bit involved, but the solo AI is very good. I think it's called Zoo, the solo bot. Then you could do far worse than going for a game of Excavation Earth. That's why it features at number 6 on my top 10 solo games of 2021. Go and check out Excavation Earth. Okay, so that's 10 to 6 done. And before we talk about my top 5 solo games of 2021, I thought I would just discuss a little bit about the games that didn't quite work for me in 2021. And let's start off with kind of the big one. It's a game that I played through the campaign, and I really didn't enjoy the campaign. A lot of people love this game. Some of my favourite peers, people like Jason Perez and even Mike Kelly over at One Stop Co-op Shop, they think this game is good. I know Jason Perez, it's a top 10 game for him. Just didn't work for me at all. I found it a chore to play. It was a game of disconnected side quests, ultimately very, very disappointing. I played through the campaign, made the review, and then got rid of it as quick as I could. And that is Sleeping Gods from Ryan Lorcat. Just didn't work for me in any way, shape or form. I found it totally boring, unnecessary, wasn't engaged. I think there's another game which is going to feature on my list which did some of the similar things, but far better this year. So Sleeping Gods didn't work for me. Another one, whilst not a disappointment, again, this hasn't been the lightning in a bottle for me that it has for a lot of people. And that's Imperium Classics. So I have this, and I've played it a number of times. I have a good time playing it. I think it's a very well-crafted deck builder that massively outstays its welcome. It always runs about 20 minutes to 30 minutes too long for me, and I think the scoring at the end is very convoluted, and yeah, it kind of prevents me going back and loving this game. The fact it needs to be a little bit more streamlined for me. Now, that's my opinion. I totally understand why people love Imperium Classics and Legends, because of course it is a very well crafted deck builder from David Turksey and from Nigel Buckle. Of course, they've then gone on to do Voidfall together as well. I understand why it works for a lot of people, just hasn't quite worked for me. So it sits, I don't know, probably in my top 50, but certainly not in my top 10 for the year. Another one, I'm a huge Alien fan. I love the Alien films. You know, I have almost all of the Alien games. So I've got the 1989-1990 game Alien, this time Aliens, this time it's War. I have the Alien Legendary Deck Builder. I have the Another Glorious Day in the Core. So when this game came out from Ravensburger, I thought, yes, I'm going to enjoy this game. Alien Fate of the Nostromo. No, just I found it tedious. Just tedious, just didn't work for me at all. It's just a simple pick up and deliver game on a really confined map. Didn't really evoke the feeling of tension for me. I have very little joy. I've tried it at different character counts, very little joy playing it. So Alien, Fate of the Nostromo came into my collection with full intent of stealing a good place on there, and it will be leaving my collection at some point this year. Another one is one of the darlings of Essen. And I didn't know much about this, but I knew of his previous games, and I thought, you know what, everybody's raving about this, maybe I'll get a copy. So I picked a copy up at Essen, and I think as a multiplayer game, people love it. As a solo game, for me, it feels half-baked. It feels like there is a good solo mode in there, but it's just, I find the solo mode that comes in the box of Boone Lake just a bit of arbitrary chore. There's a cactus track which just ramps up. I mean, all AIs cheat. I just feel like the AI in Boone Lake cheats a hell of a lot. So I'm keeping that until I do the solo review, and then I'll be getting rid of that. I've got no qualms about getting rid of that as well. So that's Alexander Pfister's Boone Lake. Big surprise, which I think technically, again, is a 2020 release, but I got in 2021. I got it twice. I've had it, sold it, had it again. I've got the expansion for it. I played it solo a number of times, solo with the increased difficulty, solo with the campaign. I haven't tried it solo with the expansion yet. And I played it with other people, and no, it's Arnak, the Lost Ruins of Arnak. Beautifully designed game. The mechanisms work so well, does absolutely nothing for me. I get such a sense of ambivalence when I'm playing the game that if I didn't play it again, it really wouldn't bother me. However, I do need to try it with the expansion, which I picked up at Essen. I haven't tried it yet, but even so, Arnak for me, when you compare this, like many people do, Dune and Arnak, then Dune is a far superior game for me. We have Resident Evil 3, the board game. From Steamforged. Now, this one that I backed and I went all in on it. And production quality is great in the main, apart from this horrible paper board that they give you. It's a really cheap piece of paper. If you saw my unboxing, you'll see that I kind of lose my shit a little bit about that there. But the more I've played the game, and I'm not massively invested in the Resident Evil IP, I've got to say that now. So for lovers of the IP, you probably enjoy this game. This is a game that does everything that you expect from a dungeon crawler. And that is really about it. You're unearthing rooms, you've got bad guys swarming on you, have objectives to have, you're managing your ammo, etc. It's all okay. I think Cursed City does a similar thing. Warhammer Cursed City does a similar thing, but does it better than Resident Evil 3. So for me, Resident Evil 3, I've got it. It will be leaving my collection at some point. Look, like everything, like a top 10 list, and like disappointments, all these things are subjective. I can only go on my viewpoint here. I know a lot of love and a lot of passion has got into some of these games. I understand people get really, really passionate when they like a game that I don't like or dislike a game that I do like. So bear in mind, this is purely subjective. It's purely my personal viewpoint and the reason why these games didn't work for me. So that's kind of some of the, let's call them disappointments, or games which didn't quite hit my button this year. Now, let's get on with my top 5 solo games of 2021. Okay, at number 5 then, we have a game which, I've already mentioned Sleeping Gods in some of the disappointments of the year, and this game does some of the same mechanisms as Sleeping Gods, but I think it does it far superior. It's based on a hugely popular game which did nothing for me. But I backed the sequel based on the previews from people like Jeremy Howard and from Michael Kelly, and I backed this game based on those, and I wasn't disappointed in the slightest. This game is Role Player Adventures from Thunderworks Games. It's a huge kind of story-based game. Narrative. You have to follow the narrative. If narrative-based games aren't for you, then you're not going to like this at all. Kind of semi-choose-your-own adventure. Yes, it will always funnel you in a certain direction. Using some of the mechanisms from role play, it's dice manipulation, it's cards which allow you to do things. It tells this wonderful story. It uses keywords which you use in Sleeping Gods, but it's used to far better effect in Role Player Adventures. And you get this, I think it's a 12 book. You get individual books which almost look like Dungeons and Dragons books, basically, to work through, and you can create your characters. You can bring your characters over from role player, which I won't do because I don't enjoy role player. And you can then have this wonderful adventure, and you will play through the scenario and then maybe create another couple of characters and play through it again, and you'll probably be done at that point, and that's fine. So I would probably play through Role Player Adventures twice twice, and then that will be it. Unless they release new content for it, it will go. But it's the type of game which, if you love a narrative-based game, and I do like a narrative-based game, it does a lot of things exceptionally well. I'm so impressed with Role Player Adventure, the quality of the production, the quality of the game trays that are in there, how easy it is to set up. It literally takes just a couple of minutes to get all the right trays out, put your adventure on the board, delve in and continue your journey. You feel yourself getting stronger and stronger, your character or characters getting stronger and stronger as the game progresses, as well as you start as your hand of cards gets bigger and bigger and your allegiances and alliances start to move. I did a review on this, I think back in November or early December, and it is a fantastic game. So number 5 for me is Role Player Adventures by Thunderworks Games. Okay, so now number 4 on my list of solo games. Top 10 solo games for 2021. This game, it was a review copy that was sent out to me by Garfield Games, and when you look at it, it looks like a couple of spreadsheets, and it's a little intimidating for people. But the experience that you have with Hadrian's Wall is just an absolutely first-rate flip and write experience. Now, you can play it solo or with other people. I think up to 3 other people. It is generally a multiplayer solitaire game or a solo game. And there is a solo campaign downloadable as well from the Garfield Games website or from BGG. And Hadrian's Wall, once you get past the fact of what it looks like, it's actually a relatively straightforward game to learn how to play. The rulebook is exceptionally well written. It takes you through all of the various icons and stages on there, and once you get that flow down, you can play the game. And it's a really nice challenge. There's something really good about Hadrian's Wall. You can play a game in about 30 minutes. I'm not a huge fan of flip and rights or roll and rights. But this really scratches a particular itch for me, if you like. I think it's an exceptionally well-designed game. I think it's a little bit potentially expensive for what is a flip and write game for some people, but as a solo player, and I think most of the people that you see online posting about this have a genuinely positive experience with Hadrian's Wall. And for that reason, it's one of the games I played quite a lot this year, and certainly throughout the summer. It'd be a game that I would get and take out to the garden with me. Hadrian's Wall sits at number 4 in my list of top 10 solo games of 2021. Now, we're on to the top 3 now of games released this year. This game came out number 3. It came out at, I think, October, November time. It was released to backers of the Kickstarter. And it's from Van Ryder Games. And if you love 80s horror films, which I do, kind of my go-to thing at night, when the kids have gone to bed, the wife's gone to bed, I'll pour myself a glass of whiskey, find an old slasher film and watch it. And of course, I'm talking about Final Girl from Van Ryder Games, based on the mechanisms that you get with Hostage Negotiator. And I've always found Hostage Negotiator okay. Final Girl really spoke to me. So I went all in. I got the pledge with the minis and the secret stuff and all the expansions and the Terror from Above and the mats, etc. And it is a fantastic, pure solo experience if you do not mind randomness. It can be random and swingy as all hell, depending on the cards that come out and the killers that you've got and the heroines that you're battling with, etc. So it can be swingy, and if you don't like that in your games, then Final Girl is not going to be for you. It's mitigable to some degree, but even so, the game can be truly tough and punishing if things don't work in your favour. I kind of like randomness. I like the unknown, and I like playing games sometimes where I don't stand a chance of winning. We're looking at Uprising that I'm playing at the moment. It's kind of halfway through one of my games here, and I'm being swamped at the moment. I've got not a chance in hell of winning this game, and that's fine. I'm playing it to develop strategies. Same with Final Girl, is the more you play it, the more you develop these strategies, the more you know what you need to do to win, but you're not going to win every single game of Final Girl. I think it's production quality-wise, absolutely stunning. Gameplay-wise, fantastic if you don't mind randomness in your games. It is a true solo and solo-only classic, and that's why it's at number 3 in my list of top 10 solo games released in 2021. Okay, so now we are down to the final 2. My number 2 game is a game which delivered to Kickstarter backers, I think, October time-ish this year. So a lot of big games came out kind of the back end of this year to Kickstarter backers. think some of that was down to obviously the shipping crisis and getting everything sorted there. And I don't actually remember backing this game. So it must have been a drunken back maybe about a year or so ago. And I'm so glad that I did. It's huge. The box is absolutely massive. And if you did not get the organizer with this, then you're going to have a bit of an issue with storage. Now, I didn't get the organizer, but Dia Games, who produced it, were kind enough to send me the organizer. And of course, I'm talking Euthia, Torment of Resurrection. It's a huge tile-laying RPG type game where you're upgrading your character to go towards these inevitable goals, maybe battling a dragon or doing other stuff. I think the game comes with 6 or 7 scenarios in the book, which are increasing in length. And there are additional scenarios that you can get as expansions as well. It's a huge, sprawling game. People have likened it to Mage Knight. In essence, there are some similarities in terms of the fact that you're laying out these tiles and they dictate where you can go on the board. But there's no deck construction or deck building here in Euthia, Torment of Resurrection. This is all about powering up your characters, getting through some of these early battles to try and get the goods and get the equipment and get the money so you can upgrade your character and get more and more powerful so you can get towards the kind of end goal big bads at the end of the game and have a chance of defeating them. Now, as a solo player, you can play it through solo. You can play it with any number of characters. There's a solo AI deck which handles combat for you, so it works in a slightly different way to the main game, which is competitive. It's also a co-op game or a solo game. It covers all bases, fantastic production qualities. I think there was something like 38 punch boards in there. I think it took me about 3 hours to kind of punch and sort everything. And then when I got the organizer, another couple of hours on top of that to sort it. But once you've done it and you lay it out, it takes up so much table real estate. You're in for a cracking adventure as you're traversing this countryside and this ever-expanding map. And depending on which scenarios you're playing, that map can get massive on the table. And you're battling through each one, and you're finding planets to upgrade, or you're coming across elementals and trying to upgrade your powers that way, or do something on there, and they have an effect on how you're playing the game. There's a lot going on in Euthia, but once you get the rules down, it's relatively straightforward to play, and there is a constant sense of progression in Euthia. I've had a lot of fun with a game that I didn't remember much about backing, had no great expectations on. In fact, when I realised it was being sent to me, I thought, well, maybe I won't even open it, I'll just sell it on. And I'm so glad I didn't, because it's ended up as my number 2 solo game released in 2021. And I will have a review coming in the next month of Euthia, Torment of Resurrection. So that's numbers 10 to number 2 there. So what is my number 1 solo game of 2021? Right, so on to number 1. Here we go. This is a game, I think it was the second game I received in 2021, and it's hit my table so many times. Now, I have all of this designer's games, with varying degrees of success in solo modes, because traditionally they're not set as solo games. But for this one, Vita Lacerda teamed up with David Turchley for the first time and gave us Kanban EV. And I can't tell you what an absolute joy and pleasure as a solo gamer Kanban EV is to play. If you like action selection games and you like Vita Lacerda games and you always think that the solo modes could do just that little bit more, then Kanban EV is for you. I have no interest in cars. I got one, I drive one. I have no interest in cars or car building. I don't work in manufacturing, so the Kanban system is kind of nothing for me. And I get it, to some people this may feel like a day at work, but for me, the amount of decision space as I'm trying to successfully keep my job battling against Messrs. Lacerda and Turksey, and of course the formidable Sandra, in building up my repertoire within the business, trying to successfully overcome objectives, trying to score the most points, and not just score points, because it's not just a beat your own score game. There's a lose mechanism in this as well. Is if you go into negative points at some points, that's it, that is game over. You get fired. So beat your own score is good, and I think on a lot of other Lacerda games, you have get this score, and this is your ranking, get this score, this is your ranking. That happens in Kanban EV, but there's also a lose mechanism as well, where you can get fired and just lose the game. Everything comes together. It's Eagle Griffin Games, so the production qualities are stellar and out of this world. You've got the fantastic rulebook, which is kind of written by Vital and along with Paul Grogan as well from Gaming Rules. You've got the core, the game itself. You know, Vital is a master Vital is a master at action selection games, and you know, certainly at the top of his games. I love all of Vital's games. I've got all of Vital's games, but this for me kind of just hits the nail in terms of looks, in terms of playability. You've got the artwork by Ian O'Toole. And finally, we have this solo mode designed by Vital and by David Turczi, and David's colleagues, people like John Albertson and maybe David Digby and Nick Shaw, etc., have all come together to create this wonderful, wonderful solo mode that doesn't feel additional. It feels an integrated part of the game, and it's such a joyous experience to put Kanban EV out and spend a good 2 or 3 hours trying to work through this, maybe a couple of hours, work through this wonderful game and try and maintain your status and not get fired. I'm looking forward to the next iteration of a Lacerda or the next coupling of Lacerda and Turkey, and that's Weather Machine. Now, I played Weather Machine as a multiplayer game taught to me by Scott Hill at GridCon. There were 4 of us playing. I had a wonderful time. I can't wait to try out the solo mode on that. It's another Vita Lacerda and another David Turczi solo mode, another Eagle Griffin game. So I've got a feeling that is going to be a huge highlight next year. But my number one solo game of 2021 is Kanban EV from Eagle Griffin Games, designed by Vita Lacerda with the solo mode by David Turczi. Wow. And there we go. Whew. So we've had my top 10 solo games released in 2021. We've had a list of honourable mentions. We've had a list of potential disappointments as well, or games that didn't quite hit the mark for me. There's so much happening this year. I've got down here Defense and Procyon 3, which comes from PSC and David Turczi. I played that on TTS with David and with Monique and Naveen from Before You Play a while back. The physical copy arrived just before Christmas, just haven't had time to get into that. I've already mentioned Uprising, Curse of the Last Emperor, which has arrived and is currently on my table. Look at this beautiful looking game here. We've got Nemesis Lockdown. I've got Dungeon Universalis. Hopefully this year we're going to get Hour of Need coming from Blacklist Games and the Sadler Brothers. We've got Frostpunk coming this year. We have Distilled coming this year. We've got the utterly fantastic Senjutsu coming this year from our friends at Stone Sword Games. Look, 2022 is gearing up to be a fantastic year. Conventions started last year. I myself did UK Games Expo, I did Essen, I did GridCon. Next year I've got Aircon, UK Games Expo, possibly Essen. I may try to get to one of the ones in the States if I can and if money allows next year. It's certainly kind of gearing up to be a massive, massive bumper year for solo gamers in 2022. So thank you very much for joining me on this rundown of my top 10 solo games of the last 12 months that were released in 2021. Thank you so much to everybody that continues to watch the channel, watch what I do. You may have noticed, some eagle-eyed viewers amongst you, that over the last few months I've had to move into my dining room. The house is getting lots and lots of renovations at the moment, so my man cave come board game room is kind of full of other bits of furniture, etc., which makes it difficult to kind of to film in there at the moment. Hopefully, come February, all that will be resolved. I can get back into my man cave and start doing my reviews from there. But this is a nice space anyway. So yeah, thank you very much for joining me on this journey. Thank you for everything, all your support throughout the last 12 months and beyond. This channel, despite being just over 2 years old, is nearly at 4,000 subscribers now. Each and every one of you, I thank you so much for doing that. So don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Check out our other videos. And one final thought. If you can't find anyone else to play with, there's nothing wrong with playing with yourselves. Until next time, bye-bye.